Startropics is one of those games that we might look back on as a blockbuster hit, right? I mean, it seems like everyone remembers the game, and fondly at that. Sure, there's a reviewer here and there that will point out its many similarities to The Legend of Zelda, but I've never heard anyone call it a bad game because of those similarities. It seems that the consensus of time is that Startropics is a great NES game, a classic even. There's a lot to like here. The graphics are great for the NES hardware because this game was released in December of 1990. By this time, the NES had been on the market for 5 years, and developers were fully familiar with the technical specifications of the system. And speaking of developers who were tech savvy, this game was invented by Nintendo Integrated Research and Development, a division more known for advancing hardware and peripherals rather than software. However, they did release some well-known titles like Punch-Out!, Super Punch-Out!, and Pilot Wing 64. But beyond just the graphics, the tropical atmosphere is inviting and charming, with clever dialogue from the natives of Sea Island and surrounding lands. There is some exploration, some humor, and a healthy challenge in the later levels, not to mention a save feature that doesn't require passwords. The game uses a battery inside the cartridge to save a player's progress, and there are 3 slots available. For a more detailed review of Startropics, I'll point you toward the Happy Video Game Nerd's review. His video goes into more detail about the gameplay and so forth than I'm willing to do. Instead, I'll simply point out that 1. I like Startropics. 2. There are so many differences between it and The Legend of Zelda that calling it a ripoff is lazy at best, and 3. There is a second game called Zoda's Revenge, Startropics 2, that disappointed both fans and Nintendo executives. The commercial failure of the second game is largely believed to be the reason that Nintendo abandoned the franchise. Many hope that Nintendo revisits this franchise in the future. The music for Startropics is appropriately bright and upbeat in most of the tracks. It captures the tropical flavor particularly well. It's not that the music pushes the hardware to the limit like Journey to Silius or Batman, nor does it have the massive, lasting appeal of Super Mario Bros. Or Castlevania, but it was well received and remembered fondly by gamers. A composer by the name of Yoshio Hirai wrote the score for Startropics. There is very little information available for this composer, not even a picture. Surprisingly, this kind of thing happens all the time when researching music of the not-too-distant past. This is further complicated by the fact that video game developers rarely use their complete name in credits for retro titles. In fact, in many cases staff members would use aliases, making research that much harder. And not to prolong this slightly off-topic diversion, we as gamers, or the kind of gamers who would care about knowing composers' names, know very little about video game music. It's true that many gamers can name 10, maybe 15 video game music composers off the top of their head. For the most famous composers like Uematsu and Kondo, it's easy to find which games they scored. Some type of sheet music is also available that we can analyze their work. But truth be told, we don't actually know much more than that, even for the big-name composers. What little information we do have for the big composers is reduced significantly for the lesser-known composers. Wouldn't it be nice if we could know exactly what their workstations looked like, what equipment they had, how closely they worked with the audio programmer, how closely they worked with the director, where were they educated, how much time did they have to write the score, how many pieces were cut from the final product and why? Since this type of information is extremely rare for those composers, and since musicologists are so slow in taking music of video games seriously, It's the responsibility of video game music lovers to collect as much credible information as we can, hence this show. Well, enough with the diversions and back to the music of Startropics. Yoshio Hirai's score effectively captures the spirit of this clearly tropical island in part by emulating sounds of traditional Caribbean instruments. For example, many tracks feature a sound that is like that of the steel pan. The steel pan is perhaps the instrument that most people associate with the Caribbean islands. It's an instrument that originated in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, a small island country that lies just north of Venezuela. Steel pans, for many years, were made from empty oil drums. Craftsmen would diligently bend the steel into its characteristic lens shape. Then, oval shapes are sunk into the bowl to create the individual pitches. The larger the oval, the deeper the pitch. Pitches are arranged like this, in a circle of fifths arrangement. This has been the standard arrangement of pitches on the steel pan since 1953, when steel pan player and pioneer Anthony "Tony" Williams first introduced it. He called it the spider web pan because of the resulting look on the instrument from the performer's point of view. Steel pans nowadays are usually not made from recycled oil drums, but carefully manufactured steel sheets that are made specifically for this musical purpose. Additionally, steel pans can be found in a variety of pitch ranges so that very low and very high pitches can be produced. In addition to using the NES's sound hardware to emulate the sound of a steel pan, Hirai also used the most common calypso rhythm in a great majority of his pieces for the game. That rhythm is... Listen carefully for that rhythm in this complete piece from the game. That rhythm repeats throughout the piece. The only thing that changes about that bass line is pitch. Hirai uses the pitches of the bass line to outline chords, in much the same way that calypso musicians would do in their music. Because many instruments used in Caribbean music, and calypso especially, are percussion instruments, they cannot sustain any pitch for very long. Once a percussionist plays the instrument, that sound starts to die away. Imagine if you were to grab some pots and pans from the kitchen and turn them upside down to make a drum set. You know you did this as a kid. Then you hit the pots and pans with a spoon or a stick. The sound is loud, but very short. The loudest that sound can ever be is the moment when you hit it. After that, the sound dies away. The same is true for percussion instruments. So, you'll notice that many sounds in calypso music and in the score for Startropics are very short. That being the case, if a composer wants to form a chord, he or she can break that chord up into its individual tones, then play those tones separately in rhythm instead of all at one time. Another really interesting technique that Hirai uses in this score is called thematic variation. Part of being a good composer is being able to write the melody that you want, then manipulating and changing that melody so that you can express many different moods. Fans of film music or opera will know this concept very well. Take these quick examples from John Williams' score for the Star Wars films. One moment, a melody or theme can be performed slowly with a tender sound. Then, that very same theme can be performed in a triumphant way. And again, that very same melody can be played in battle mode. It shows a degree of skill and technique when a composer can manipulate a theme and its variations in this way. In fact, it's very common for composers throughout the history of music to write works that completely focus on this technique. They're commonly called, appropriately enough, theme and variations. Yoshio Hirai uses variation to great effect in this game. Throughout the game, dungeons are located in caves on the island, and the music of these dungeons will be music that you hear most of the time while you play the game. Listen to this theme. Now that you have that theme in mind, listen to this variation. Notice how the melody in both examples were nearly the same, just a few pitches changed between them. Also notice how the first example used the steel pan sound, indicating a connection to the island. The second example used a very different, very artificial and detuned sound. This indicates a connection to something futuristic, synthesized, and unnatural. That actually fits very well, because the second example only played near the end of the game where the player battles through dungeons on an alien spaceship. It's really interesting how the same melody, played slightly different by orchestration or small pitch changes, can tell us a lot about the world that we're exploring. So, you want to buy the game? Well, this game has an unusual release history. It was developed in Japan, but never released there. This game was released in North America in December of 1990 and in Europe on August of 1992. Original cartridges for the NES can be found on auction websites for very cheap. Also, in 2008, Nintendo released Startropics on the Wii's Virtual Console. That leaves no excuse as the physical game and its downloadable counterpart are abundant and cheap. The soundtrack was never officially released, and there is no music option for players to scroll through. Streaming sites like YouTube should set you right up when you want to hear just the audio. So, my hat off to Yoshio Hirai and his score for the classic title, Startropics. I wish that more information were available for this composer. All we know is that Mr. Hirai also worked on Zoda's Revenge Startropics 2. Apart from that, in the credits for Land of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse for the Sega Master System, a person named Y. Hirai appears as the message screen programmer. This is the same name that we find in the credits for Startropics. While I can't confirm that this person is the Yoshio Hirai that wrote the score for Startropics, I can say that it's not outside the realm of possibility. Opportunities like this are what the VGMP show and community are all about. If anyone out there has any information about Mr. Yoshio Hirai, please leave a comment below. The community of video game music enthusiasts can help shed some light on this mysterious but much appreciated composer. If you like this video, be sure to check out my previous episodes. Feel free to like and comment on this video and to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.